The 1965 United States quarter dollar is one of the most historically significant coins in modern U.S. numismatics because it marked the beginning of a new era in American coinage. Prior to 1965, the Washington quarter, like most U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars, had been struck primarily in 90% silver and 10% copper. However, the rising price of silver in the early 1960s created a serious problem for the U.S. Mint and the Treasury Department. By 1964, the market price of silver had climbed so high that the intrinsic metal value of silver quarters and dimes was approaching, and sometimes even exceeding, their face value. This led to widespread hoarding of coins, circulation shortages, and even fears that the nation would not have enough coinage available for everyday commerce. To address this crisis, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. This act authorized a complete change in the metallic composition of U.S. dimes and quarters, effectively ending the use of silver in these denominations. Beginning with the 1965 dated coins, quarters were no longer produced with silver, but instead struck in a clad composition of an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This copper-nickel clad composition is still used in U.S. quarters today. The 1965 Washington quarter retains the same basic design that had been in use since 1932, when the coin was first introduced to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The obverse, designed by sculptor John Flanagan, features a left-facing portrait of Washington with the word Liberty inscribed above his head, the motto "In God We Trust" to the left, and the date 1965 placed directly below the bust. The reverse displays a heraldic eagle with outstretched wings perched on a bundle of arrows, symbolizing readiness for defense, with two olive branches positioned beneath to represent peace. Surrounding this imagery is the inscription, United States of America at the top and quarter dollar at the bottom, along with the national motto, E Pluribus Unum, placed just above the eagle's head. This design was iconic and familiar to Americans, but the real innovation in 1965 was not in the artwork, it was in the composition of the coin itself. One important detail about the 1965 quarter is that it does not bear a mint mark, regardless of where it was produced. Traditionally, quarters struck in Denver carried a small d mint mark, while those struck in Philadelphia carried no mark. However, to reduce coin hoarding and speculation during this transitional period, the U.S. Mint suspended the use of mint marks altogether between 1965 and 1967. This means that while the coin may be casually referred to as a 1965 D quarter in error, no such coin actually exists. All 1965 quarters, whether struck in Philadelphia or Denver, lack any identifying mint mark. As a result, they are indistinguishable by origin. This makes the 1965 issue somewhat unique in American numismatics because, for those 3 years, collectors cannot determine the exact mint of issue based on the coin's markings. In terms of mintage, the 1965 quarter was produced in extremely large numbers to help relieve the coin shortage. Over 1.8 billion quarters dated 1965 were struck, making it one of the highest mintages of the Washington quarter series. Because of this massive output, most 1965 quarters are common and have little numismatic value in circulated condition. However, they hold great historical importance as the first copper-nickel clad quarters in American history. Collectors often seek out high-grade examples, especially those certified as mint state, MS, 65 or higher, where clean surfaces and strong strikes make the coin more desirable. In addition, a small number of transitional errors exist. Some 1965 dated quarters were mistakenly struck on leftover 90% silver planchets from 1964, creating highly valuable error coins. These rare transitional silver quarters can weigh around 6.25 grams, compared to the standard clad weight of 5.67 grams, and they have sold at auction for thousands of dollars. The significance of the 1965 quarter extends far beyond its face value. It represents a shift in U.S. monetary history during a time of economic transition, when the government was forced to adapt to global metal markets and growing public demand for coinage. It also reflects the beginning of the modern era of U.S. coins, where intrinsic precious metal content was removed from circulating denominations. While collectors at the time lamented the end of silver coinage, the clad composition ensured that quarters could continue to circulate without being hoarded or melted down for their metal. This change stabilized the coin supply and allowed commerce to function more smoothly. Today, the 1965 quarter is a reminder of how economic pressures can reshape even the most familiar objects in daily life, and it remains a cornerstone pie. The 1970 United States quarter dollar, more commonly known as the Washington quarter, is a coin struck by the United States Mint and belongs to one of the most widely recognized coin series in American numismatic history. The quarter has a denomination of 25 cents, or $0.25, and the 1970 issue marks a period in which the Washington quarter had already been in circulation for nearly 4 decades. First introduced in 1932, the Washington quarter was originally created to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth and was intended as a one-year commemorative coin. However, due to its immediate popularity and practicality, the design was adopted for continued use in U.S. commerce, eventually replacing the standing Liberty quarter. By 1970, the Washington quarter was a firmly established coin in American life, serving as a standard piece of change in everyday transactions, vending machines, and parking meters across the country. The design of the 1970 quarter remained consistent with the Washington quarter series. On the obverse front, the coin displays a left-facing profile of George Washington, the first president of the United States, sculpted by John Flanagan, whose initials JF can be seen at the base of Washington's bust. The inscriptions include the word Liberty prominently above the portrait, the national motto, "In God We Trust," to the left, and the date 1970 centered at the bottom. The reverse, back, features the heraldic bald eagle with outstretched wings, clutching a bundle of arrows in its talons, with 2 olive branches beneath, symbolizing both strength and peace. Around the rim is the inscription, United States of America at the top, with E pluribus unum, just above the eagle's head, and the denomination quarter dollar placed along the bottom edge. This design had been in use since 1932 and would remain until 1998, when it was replaced by the 50-state quarters program beginning in 1999. From a technical standpoint, the 1970 Washington quarter reflects a significant change in American coinage history. Prior to 1965, U.S. quarters were composed of 90% silver and 10% copper. However, due to rising silver prices in the early 1960s, the mint transitioned to a copper-nickel clad composition. Thus, the 1970 quarter is struck from a core of pure copper with outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it a silvery appearance without actual silver content. The coin weighs 5.67 grams, has a diameter of 24.3 millimeters, and features a reeded edge, which historically helped prevent people from shaving off small amounts of precious metal when coins were still made of silver. The 1970 quarter, therefore, belongs to the clad coinage era, a practical yet symbolic turning point that reflected the economic realities of modern America. The 1970 Washington quarter was struck at 3 different U.S. mint facilities: Philadelphia, no mint mark; Denver, D mint mark; and San Francisco, S mint mark. The Philadelphia Mint produced regular circulation strikes without a mint mark, while the Denver Mint did the same with a D mark on the obverse, just to the right of Washington's ponytail. The San Francisco Mint primarily issued proof coins, which were struck with specially polished dies and planchets, resulting in a mirror-like surface and sharp details intended for collectors rather than circulation. Interestingly, the San Francisco Mint also produced some business strike quarters for circulation in 1970, which can occasionally cause confusion among new collectors. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 1970 quarter is the existence of rare varieties and mint errors, which greatly influence its desirability and value among numismatists. The most famous of these is the 1970 S-proof quarter struck on a 1941 Canadian quarter planchet. This extraordinary error occurred when a leftover blank from a foreign coin contract was accidentally fed into the minting press. Because the size of the Canadian quarter was slightly different, the design of the Washington quarter did not fully strike, resulting in an unusual and valuable rarity. One such coin reportedly sold for over $35,000 at auction, making it one of the most celebrated error coins of modern U.S. numismatics. Other collectible varieties include double dies, off-center strikes, and clipped planchets, all of which attract attention from error coin enthusiasts. In terms of production numbers, the 1970 quarters were minted in significant quantities, ensuring that examples are still widely available today. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 136 million quarters, while the Denver Mint struck more than 417 million, making the 1970 D one of the most common issues of the series. The San Francisco Mint, by contrast, produced around 2.6 million proof coins, which were sold directly to collectors. Because of these large mintages, most 1970 quarters in circulated condition are worth only face value, or 25 cents, though unsure. The 1980 D Washington quarter is a coin minted by the United States Mint as part of the long-running Washington quarter series that began in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. This particular issue was struck at the Denver Mint, as indicated by the D Mint mark on the obverse of the coin, just to the right of Washington's ponytail ribbon. Like all quarters produced from 1965 until 1998, it is composed of a copper-nickel-clad planchet, with an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin its silver-like appearance, without containing actual silver. The coin weighs 5.67 grams, has a diameter of 24.3 millimeters, and a reeded edge. On the obverse, the portrait of George Washington, designed by sculptor John Flanagan, appears facing left with the word Liberty arched above his head, the motto, "In God We Trust," to the left, and the date 1980 centered at the bottom. The reverse features the classic heraldic eagle design, also by Flanagan, showing a bald eagle with outstretched wings clutching a bundle of arrows, symbolic of military readiness, with olive branches placed below, symbolizing peace. The words United States of America curve across the top, with E pluribus unum just beneath, and the denomination $quarter at the bottom. In terms of mintage, the 1980 D Washington quarter had an extremely high production run, with 518,327,487 pieces struck in Denver alone, making it a very common coin in circulation. Because of this, most examples carry only face value, especially those that have circulated heavily over the decades. In circulated grades, the coin is typically worth 25 cents, but uncirculated examples, particularly those in higher mint state grades, MS, 65 and above, can bring premiums of a few dollars to collectors. Gem-quality specimens with sharp strikes, full luster, and minimal marks are scarcer and more desirable, while coins with special designations such as full strike or exceptional eye appeal can command higher prices at auction. Proof versions of the 1980 quarter were not made at Denver, but at the San Francisco Mint with a S Mint mark, so any proof-like appearance on a 1980 D coin would be the result of unusual striking conditions or a high-quality example. The coin represents an interesting period in U.S. numismatic history. By 1980, the clad coinage system introduced in the mid-1960s had become well established, and silver quarters were long gone from circulation. Inflation during the late 1970s and early 1980s meant that a quarter's purchasing power had diminished compared to earlier decades, yet the coin remained essential in everyday commerce for vending machines, payphones, and public transportation. Collectors often overlook the 1980 D quarter because of its large mintage and lack of intrinsic silver value, but for beginners, it serves as an affordable introduction to the Washington quarter series. Condition, strike quality, and errors are where this coin gains added interest. Notable varieties and mint errors for 1980 D quarters include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and double dies, which can increase collector value significantly depending on severity and demand. Overall, the 1980 D Washington quarter is not rare but holds historical importance as part of the long-running Washington quarter design that spanned from 1932 to 1998 before being replaced by the 50-state quarters program. It reflects both America's numismatic tradition and its practical role in everyday transactions. For collectors, It may not be a treasure unless found in pristine condition or with striking errors, but as a coin still circulating more than 40 years later, it remains a small, tangible piece of U.S. history, connecting everyday commerce with the legacy of George Washington and the symbolic imagery of the American eagle.